The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
Welcome back to the show, Cherries fans, and thank you for joining us. Now, before I get going, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell button below. It helps this channel to grow. Now, of course, last time out, we was beaten by Brighton Hove Albion at Dean Court 2-1. To be honest, it was a bit of a masterclass from Fabian Hertzler's side as they restricted AFC Bournemouth from playing our game. Of course, now that is 2 defeats in a row. Let's not make it 3. Now, before we get stuck into this week's preview, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. Find out more about them, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. So, this weekend, we're visiting Gary O'Neill and Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, of course, Gary O'Neill, the former manager of this football club, somebody that some fans called a PE teacher, a clown, and somebody that Wolves fans didn't look very happy with until recently. Now, what we're going to do is find out a little bit more about Wolves' upturning form. And it's a pleasure to welcome back onto the show Dave Azzopardi from Talking Wolves. Welcome back to the show, Dave. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Yeah, thank you for having me back on.
Not a problem at all. Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Good.
So, first things first. Of course, it's not been the greatest of seasons so far.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my own thoughts about this, and I've seen tweets going around, and there was one tweet, before the Southampton win that you had recently, calling Gary O'Neill a Muppet. Now, former fans have turned around, and it's a segment. It's not everybody, but a segment of them have said that he's a PE teacher. Some put a clown face, and some put even worse. So, considering what's going on at Wolves, is he a miracle worker or a Muppet?
Probably in between the two, to be fair, Craig. I don't think he did a very good job last season, as I think a lot of people know. I think there was a lot of players at Wolves when Lopetegui had walked away that almost had a point to prove and wanted to prove to Lopetegui and a lot of other people that, they were good footballers. And I think Gary O'Neill, I don't want to take any credit away from him because I think he did a very good job to get that team playing some good football together. But no doubt, the form fell off a cliff second half of last season, really. And we struggled, as you've seen so far at the start of this season. Yeah, I think if we had this conversation maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago before we picked up that win against Southampton, the conversation would have been very different to what we're going to be talking about today. But, he's proved everyone over the last couple of weeks. He's starting to silence a couple of people. Long way to go because we're still in a very precarious position, really. But me included, I think there were a lot of Wolves fans that thought probably he should have been shown the door Probably after we played Brentford, which wasn't the last international break. It was the international break before that. They thumped us, and I think everyone thought he should have been shown the door. But fair play to the club. They gave him a bumper contract in the summer. They've stuck with him. They knew at the start of the season how difficult the fixtures were, and now they're giving him this running until Christmas. So fair play to them. And obviously, as a fan of Wolves, I hope it pays off and we're in a much better position come Christmas.
I'll give you my view of what I think is going wrong, and I think I think a lot of Wolves fans will agree with me on this. Is that a lot of the problems come from the boardroom and Jeff Shee. Of course, he really did upset the fan base at the start of the season with the hike in ticket prices, and it was a quite considerable hike as well. But when I look at also the players that have been sold, there was over £95 million worth of players sold, during this window alone. If we go back to the previous summer, you've had the likes of Ruben Neves, Raul Jimenez leave the club. Do you think I'm being harsh on Jeff Shee? That has he done some good in these past 2 years, or has it just been a case where Wolves have been just selling players, not replacing them properly, bringing in players probably in the wrong positions? And of course, George Mendes was a big part of Wolverhampton Wanderers a while back. What do you make of the mess?
I think if you were looking at the last 2 years, I probably would say they've done more harm than good to the club. It's a very difficult conversation to have, especially amongst Wolves fans, because you've got both two sides to it, really. Ultimately, Wolves would be nowhere near the position they're in now, and we wouldn't have had the moments that we've had over the last 5 or 6 years if it wasn't for Fosun. No doubt about that. With the connections they've had, including George Mendes, who you mentioned, and with the finances and the money that they've pumped into it. But ultimately, it's always going to get to a point, and I think for us, that point was COVID, where Fosun as a business started to lose money. They pumped a hell of a lot of money into Wolves. Our momentum suddenly stopped as a football club because we were on an upward up until COVID, really, and we sort of form fell off a cliff. And they pumped that much money into Wolves. Really, they needed to try and get some back. So, purely from a business and finance point of view, I can understand their stance on things. It's just the way, like you said, the ticket prices, certain areas of recruitment have been questionable. Not so much over the last 12 months, but definitely sort of going back 2 or 3 years. There were Adama Traore was a good example. In the peak of his time at Wolves, you could have come out, demanded 60+ million for him. They waited a year or so. His form just didn't continue, and they ended up loaning him out to Barcelona with an option to buy. Barcelona didn't buy him, and all of a sudden he had 12 months left on his contract, and he ran his contract down. You've gone from a player where you could have probably got 30 million for to getting absolutely nothing for. And there was a few of those. I think, it's difficult, but I think there was a lot of blame. And even Saturday, we're going back to Gary O'Neill here. Saturday, when we beat Fulham, the lineup was so disjointed in terms of personnel who started that game, because we've got 4 centre-backs out injured. And a lot of people going mad about Gary O'Neill. And I said, hold on. It's not Gary O'Neill's fault that we've got 4 centre-backs injured. He's got to put out the team that he thinks is best to win. And ultimately, it worked out. Even after the win against Southampton, it wasn't a great performance. We beat them 2-0. And I had fans in our comments saying, he's still not good enough, he's got to go, which is crazy after you've just picked up your first win of the season. After the Fulham game, it was a little bit more muted. I think people enjoyed the victory a little bit more, and all the focus was on Matheus Cunha. But there's a lot of question marks over the ownership of Wolves at the moment, and I do wonder. There's a lot of rumours about their future. From their point of view, it sounds like Fosun want to stay. Wolves are a big part of their sort of portfolio as such, but there are whispers that they may be looking to sell up. For what fee, I don't know. To who, I don't know. But definitely over the next 12 to 18 months, it's going to be very interesting to see where Fosun stand, because we've got a lot of money that came in the summer, which you mentioned, wasn't completely spent. I think there should be still some money there to spend. Then next summer will be interesting, because you've got the likes of Matheus Cunha kicking on. We've got a lot of talented players. it'll be interesting to see what their stance is with the transfers and the finances, and of course with things like tickets as well going into next summer.
Are you concerned, though, Dave, that Fosun, considering the situation they're in, and are they in financial difficulty as a company? Who knows? But of course, you've mentioned Mateus Cunha there, Hwang Hee-chan as well. They're very important players to you. Are you concerned, considering that they've let the likes of Ruben Neves go and the players, Max Kilman, during the summer as well, and Pedro Neto, of course, some big players to really replace there. Are you concerned that Fosun might still cash in on the stars that are left? Or do you feel that they're sensible enough to go, right, we need to give Gary some tools to keep the club up?
Yeah, I have full faith that in January none of these players will be moved on. I think in the summer it's probably going to be a different conversation. The players you mentioned there, maybe not so much Jimenez, but like Neves and Neto, definitely. We as fans we expected them to go when they did. To be honest, Neves overstayed. I'm not going to say overstayed his welcome, because I think every Wolves fan would have wanted him to stay, but he stayed a lot longer than what we expected him to. And I think both players, we probably got fees that were quite fair. It's not like we've undersold them for a certain fee. I think Max Kilman was a good player, but I think the fee that we got for him, you have to accept. But ultimately, it's how you replace those players. And I don't think Fosun have done that too brilliantly, to be honest. Neto is a very, very hard player to replace. In terms of quality, you'll struggle to find a player like for like in terms of his quality. And I don't think Wolves have. But Gary, to be fair to Gary O'Neill, he's found different ways to get the best out of other players. But I think the main issue for Wolves is that, and there's clubs such as Brighton, and I know they're an example that probably everybody uses when you talk about transfers at the moment. But when they know maybe a player is going to be sold, like say for argument's sake, they know Liverpool or whoever are interested in João Pedro, probably in January, or maybe they've already got it in Evan Ferguson, they will bring in another striker as an understudy, wait 6 months to bed them in and sell João Pedro on, and they've got their ready-made replacement there. Whereas Wolves haven't really tended to do that. I am seeing it maybe a little bit more. We've got João Gomez now. We've signed Andre in the summer. It wouldn't surprise me next summer if João Gomez has moved on and you've got your ready-made replacement in Andre. So it's just about having sort of a plan in place, where Wolves haven't really been able to do that over the last 18 months, 2 years. And that's why it's a little bit of a mess. And ultimately, when things go wrong, like they have done so far this season, you have to point the finger at someone. And it's either Gary O'Neill or the board. And I think both parties in this current situation are getting a little bit stick. But as we speak right now, we're going into this game 4 matches unbeaten, 2 wins in the last 2. So it's not all, it's not all rosy, but certainly looking much better going into this game on Saturday, thankfully. And there's a little bit more positivity amongst the Wolves fan base.
Do you know what? This could be the worst possible time for us to play you, because going back to when Gary was in charge at AFC Bournemouth, he was a manager that, and he did have, after the World Cup, of course, the stupidly positioned World Cup in the middle of the season in Qatar, he had a major wobble. And it did look at times, and that's where all the PE teacher and the clown comments all come from, is that period. Because there was talks of Marcelo Bielsa coming in, Carlos Corberán, all these managers coming in. And Gary did a fantastic job when he turned it round and we went on a run. Considering, though, I think you probably had, and would it be fair to say, Dave, you had the hardest start out of any team in the Premier League this season?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think they were up to stats and stuff in terms of difficulty rankings and stuff. We did have the hardest start in the Premier League.
Yeah.
And I think now, between now and the new year, I think everybody we play, unless there were major movements over the last weekend, everyone we play now is in the bottom half of the table. Okay, that does include United and Spurs. Spurs may have jumped into the top half now, but as of last weekend, it was everyone's in the bottom half. So, we've got yourselves, who I think both sets of fans are probably looking at this thinking we can get points from this game. But before Christmas, we play Leicester. We've got Ipswich at home. We've got Everton away. We've got West Ham. Between now and Christmas, genuinely, we could. It's so easy to say, but we could pick up points from every single game. We in my opinion, we've got the quality to be able to do that. Football, and especially the Premier League, is not that easy. So we will probably lose a couple of games on the way. But ultimately now the fixture list is looking a hell of a lot kinder than what it was 6 or 8 weeks ago. So this is the period now for Gary. Ultimately, he's got to win a handful of these games, and he's got to go into Christmas with our heads above the water. If he's still in the drop zone come Christmas, I think there are going to be conversations to be had again. But I still think fair play to the club. They've stuck by him. They're giving him a chance, considering they gave him a 4-year deal. They knew it was a difficult period of fixtures. I think the quality of football should have been better in that time. But ultimately it's picking up a little bit now. And hopefully, it come January, February, we'll look back at this period and think, what were we worrying about? Because, like I said, I think the squad is strong enough that we should be competing in a much higher position in the Premier League table.
I really hope that Gary can keep Wolves up, because I've got a lot of time for Gary O'Neill. I thought he was harshly sacked at AFC Bournemouth. I can understand now, with who we were trying to bring in, why we made that move at that time. But let's look at it from a different perspective. What does Gary need to do to be sacked? What would be good enough for the Wolves fans to say, right, Gary is fine till the end of the season? Or, I guess if you was to lose every game between now and Christmas, he would be out the door. What is the bare minimum?
He's like I said, I think he's got to, by Christmas, possibly the new year, we've got to make sure we're out of the drop zone, I think. And hopefully have a little bit of a cushion. Because when we get to Christmas, we play after the new year. I think we've got United and Spurs, Forest and Villa or something like that. So tough games in terms of difficulty. So you want to give yourself a bit of breathing space. But like I said, I think if we get into Christmas and we're in the bottom 3 and we're like 4 or 5 points adrift again, which is easily doable. It was frustrating last weekend when we'd won. It's great for us to win, but then West Ham win, Ipswich and Palace all pick up points as well. It's so difficult down there at the moment. And, there's a lot of, even you guys, and there's a big chunk of teams in and around maybe 6 points ahead of us in 3 weeks' time could get dragged into it as well. I think he's just got to keep his head above the water come Christmas. But it's going to take a long time. And I think I'm talking another 3-4 games of positive results before he starts to get people back on side again. You were talking earlier about someone calling him a Muppet. I think that was one of a number of people. There were boos ringing around Molineux. I think the week before, I think it was against Brentford, he made a substitution and the fans basically they're saying you don't know what you're doing because the substitution was questionable as well. So I still like to give it at times a little bit him the benefit of the doubt a little bit, because he's still a young manager, really. This is his first full season with a pre-season. This is, because he got thrown in the deep end with you guys, did a good enough job. Obviously moved on for tactical reasons or whatever. Got chucked in the deep end with us last season and did an okay job. And this year really is the first time where he's been able to implement his plans, throughout pre-season. So I'm hoping it will, this is part and parcel of being a football fan. It's part and parcel for him of being a football manager. You're not going to win every single game. You're not going to have the fans cheering your name every single game. So I certainly hope, that he could turn things around and get the fans on board once again. And, like I said, towards the end of the season, we're looking back at the start of the season and thinking, what were we worried about? Because we are strong enough to be competing.
Yeah, likewise. I really do hope that Wolves and Gary O'Neill do stay up, because it would be, firstly, I really like Wolves as a football club. How the club has been run, and of course the club's fans have always been really good to me, but Gary O'Neill as well, what he's actually done for the football club and what he did for AFC Bournemouth. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, he can do that. What do you think he needs to do in the January window to make that team stronger, to make sure that you don't fall back into that drop zone if you are out of it, or pull yourself out of the drop zone if you are?
It's an interesting one, because I think in terms of depth and numbers, Wolves are probably the strongest the strongest they've been since they've been back promoted. Just not so much in terms of quality, because I think the quality that we had in the early years under Nuno was phenomenal. But in terms of depth in certain positions now, it's the best it's been for a long time. Centre back, they've said, is the number one priority in January, which is an interesting one again, because I think we have got some good players at centre back. Craig Dawson coming into the last year of his contract though, and I think maybe he'll be moved on in the summer. He's had a couple of little injuries. He even had the sickness bug already a couple of times this season. We're short on numbers there, and like I said earlier, to have 4 centre backs out injured at the same time is unlucky for Gary O'Neill. But I think they'll bring in a centre back, whether that be a permanent deal or maybe on a loan. I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe bringing a left back on a short term loan deal as well. But other than that, I think midfield we're pretty solid. In the forward areas, we're fairly solid as well. So I think it'd be a quiet January for Wolves, but he's got the quality there. It's just trying to find the sort of balance. We had to play Mario Lemina at centre back against Fulham, and he was brilliant on Saturday.
Yeah.
So that's why I think there's going to be a big question mark. So I'm quite obviously we're recording this on Thursday. I'm quite intrigued to see what Gary says in his pre-match press conference, because Mario Lemina played at centre back and was phenomenal on Saturday. And a lot of people are saying you don't change your winning team, but you've got a centre back there, and Totti, who's been playing left back for the majority of the season, playing alongside him. What does he do? Does he bring back his tried and tested, and trusted centre backs, or does he stick with what won the last game? So I'm intrigued with that. But yeah, the squad's fairly solid. It's just trying to strengthen in certain areas. But I think Wolves are very cautious that they don't want to overload certain positions, because they want to make sure everyone's getting a good amount of game time and everybody's happy. As soon as you start bringing in 3-4 players fighting for 1 or 2 positions, and that's when you start to get problems. So Wolves are quite cautious that they want to try and keep some sort of squad harmony between the camp as well.
Do you know what? It's quite an interesting discussion, this, because I think from the outside looking in at Wolves, and especially towards the end of last season when we beat you at Molineux, there was the view that from other teams, and I've it's not just Bournemouth fans that I've heard this from. I've heard it from other teams across the Premier League, is that Wolves don't look like they've got that strength in depth, but you think they do.
Mm-hmm.
But is it just that it's a bit lopsided at the moment, that the strength is in particular areas and not in others?
I think we've got an all right depth across the pitch, really. I think last season was an interesting one, because everyone had predicted us to go down.
Yeah.
At the start of last season, which was fair enough because of the situation that we were in. And Gary proved a lot of people wrong. And we finished the season off dreadfully, to be fair. And I think if you took notice of that form, you probably think, there's going to be a hangover. Wolves are going to carry it on, which we sort of have to a degree. But I certainly think in terms of depth and quality, like it's funny now in terms of, you do a Bournemouth channel, I do a Wolves channel.
Yeah.
But now I'm going on social media, and all I'm seeing is mainstream football YouTubers, TikTokers talk about Mateus Cunha, talk about how he's the best thing since sliced bread, how their teams have got to sign him. And I thought, he's been this good for 12. Maybe he's not been hitting these numbers, but he's been this good since the start of the season, and even going into last season. So why aren't we talking about him more? So I think Wolves have got the quality. I just don't think it's spoken about enough. But I suppose as a fan of quote unquote a smaller club, it's nice sometimes to be under the radar when your team's in the press all the time, and the eyes and the magnifying glasses on certain aspects of your club or certain players. It's difficult. So I think the quality's always been there. It's just when it clicks. I think Wolves have shown quality all throughout the season, despite it's being in the bottom 3 for the majority of the campaign. It's just had to click at certain moments. So, and at times it's fallen. We've fallen apart, conceded stupid goals, loads from set pieces. But the last 4 weeks, I would say, it's sort of to a degree clicked, and Wolves are starting to play some really good football. And I think especially over the last 2 weeks have shown what quality that we've got. And for teams in and around us and the similar sort of quality than us, we'll really put them to the test, I think.
Apart from the odd games like against Brentford and against Chelsea at the start of the season, you had a decent fight against Manchester City, against Liverpool. You put up a real battle. Against Brighton, you got a point there, which is no easy place to go to. So, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, and I think that people, it's quite nice to go under the radar
Oh, for
sometimes.
sure. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
we did that when we finished, just out shy of the European places. Nobody was talking about Eddie Howe and Bournemouth, and at the start of the season, it was all this second season syndrome thing, which everybody seems to have forgotten about because it seems to be the teams that come up seem to be going down at the moment. But yeah, I think it's always nice to go under the radar. So, how concerned are you about Bournemouth's threats? Of course, Semenyo is actually suspended for this game, but there is a lot more threats like Justin Kluivert. Milos Kerkez has been excellent so far this season. So,
Yeah. Sorry, Craig. Yeah, I mean that every team in the Premier League has got a lot of quality. I think even the striker is it. I don't know how I'm pronouncing.
Evan
Evan Nielsen, is
Nielsen,
it?
Evan
Yeah,
Nielsen, yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I mean, he was really well spoken about when he was at Porto, and I remember we were linked with him some time ago, obviously with the Portuguese link, but I know his form had fallen off a little bit, and I was quite intrigued by the signing when Bournemouth brought him in.
yeah.
And obviously he's got a couple of goals. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've watched every single minute of Bournemouth this season, but I know there's quality, and I know, Kerkez as well was a player that we've been linked with. And I remember the game last season at Molineux, especially where I thought we were really unlucky. We had the goal quite controversially disallowed, if you remember VAR, and I think Kerkez got sent off in that game as well.
Yeah.
But you got quality all over the pitch, and I think that the head coach. Look, we could have a conversation about why they replaced Gary O'Neill, but obviously it worked, and he had a slow start last season, and he really kicked on, and in the end was a nominee for manager of the season. So there's quality there. There's quality in the dugout as well. So it's going to be a tricky game for Wolves. It always will be, and I'm always a bit cautious going into these games, especially when we're on such good form, because these good results for us. We beat Southampton, yes, but it was at home, and it wasn't the best of performances. We've had an international break. We've smashed Fulham, and now everyone's going to go into this automatic thing, right, we're going to beat Bournemouth. And that's not always the case. And Bournemouth have been a bit of a bogey side for us at Molineux. And Gary O'Neill beat us the year before as well, whilst we're under Lopetegui. So
Yeah.
it's not going to be a straightforward game. I know that for sure. But I don't know, Wolves have seemed to now have clicked and found out, right, yeah, we need to do this, and this is going to work and stuff. So, other than the Arsenal game, first game of the season, we scored in every other game. So, in terms of in front of goal, we've been okay. If they can back it up with another clean sheet, then great. But yeah, tough game nonetheless, I think.
We do this and you know what I'm going to ask every guest we do it. You've done it before. You've predicted before. How do you think it's going to go, Dave?
I think it's going to be a very tight game, as expected. But I think it's going to be a goal either way. I think both teams will score, so I think it's going to be a 2-1. And obviously, with me being a Wolves fan and with it being at Molineux, I'll back Wolves a 2-1 victory. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me to see it go the other way, to be fair, Craig. But yeah, I think with Wolves, how well they've been playing the last couple of weeks, I'll back Wolves to get a 2-1 win.
I'm going to go 2-1 Bournemouth. I'm not going to bet against my own team, Dave, even though I am wearing a gold top. So
yeah,
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure.
It looks red on the camera, so you might get away with it just about, I think.
Yeah. Some Wolves fans are going to think that I'm converting, but I think it'll be 2-1 Bournemouth. I think Evan Nielsen will score. And do you know what? I think Justin Kluivert, will probably get a goal as well. So yeah, 2-1. I'm going to go for, but it's going to be a tight game. It's going to be a tight game. I don't think it's going to be looking back to, the previous results. It's not going to be like Chelsea. It's not going to be like Brentford. Hopefully Wolves have got that out of their system and you can move forwards. And yeah, like I say, I do really hope that Wolves and Gary O'Neill stay in the Premier League. And I'm confident he'll be able to do that.
I hope so as well, man.
Before you go, Dave, do tell everybody where they can find Talking Wolves.
Yeah, so like I said, Talking Wolves are on all the socials. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and obviously YouTube is where we post all our content mainly. So we do previews like this one where Craig will be jumping on our preview. That's all, give the Bournemouth point of view, and then we'll have my reaction after the game. We get the fans on to give their reaction as well, and then we do like a longer podcast afterwards as well. So yeah, fingers crossed it's a good game and may the best team win. And thanks for having me on again, Craig, and I'm sure I'll catch you for the reverse fixture.
Yeah, not a problem at all, Dave, and a pleasure as always. And yeah, we'll catch up very, very soon.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this show. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell button below. It helps the channel to grow. Now, do also go check out all of our previous interviews and shows as well. We had Johnny Phillips on from Wolves last season, so go have a watch of that as well. Also, we have had other special guests as well. You'll be able to find it in the interview tab. We've had David Icke, Omid Jalili, Harry Redknapp. We've had Richard Archer from Hardfire, Richie Neville from Five. We've had Damon Minchella from the Blue Tones, Gaz Whelan from the Happy Mondays, Peter Hooton from the Farm, and lots more as well. So sorry if I've missed anybody out, but yeah, I was running out of breath with how many special guests we've had on this show. Like I say, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell button below. We are now on Blue Sky as well. So if you are on Blue Sky, feel free to follow us on there. UTC IAD AFCB is the handle on Blue Sky, as it is on Instagram, X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, and of course, here on YouTube as well. And thank you to everybody listening to us on Spotify or Apple Music, or many of the alternative podcast listening platforms. But until the next show, up the cherries, and thank you for joining us.
The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.